Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we're doing Tree Connect 4, which, as the title suggests, is just Connect 4, but instead of like game pieces or chips, you play with trees instead. And if you're wondering why that doesn't make any sense at all, that's a great way to segue into prefacing the fact that this is one of the dumbest projects that I've ever worked on. At least with the Ghast Pixel Connect 4 project, I started with the Ghast Pixel itself and then moved on to saying, hey, what could I do with this? But the reality is that just nobody in history has ever said, hey, I need to play Connect 4 with trees. I'll go through the horror story of how this thing actually came to be in a little bit, but first let's talk about its features. I'd say arguably the best thing about this thing is the interface, because instead of pushing buttons you actually place game chips into this thing. And what that does is it sends a signal to our little machine to send our friend over here with a sapling all the way to the slice he selected and plant a tree. We've also got the reset button over here, which basically just cremates the entire board, but I'm not going to show that yet because it takes so long to get to this state of the game. On the right, I've set up a little display that tells you if you can play another turn. Yes, this machine actually comes with spam-proof protection, which is not a luxury most of my machines get. Which, by the way, is probably an even greater measure of my incompetence, because putting a quality of life feature on a machine that's already so rampant with horrible problems is probably a pretty good indicator of my misalignment of priorities. And also, we've got the turn indicator, which in no way helps you read the board any better. Number one, because this entire front row is basically always covered by the redstone, and also just because it's impossible to see these things from how far it is away. Actually, I should probably add some lights to this thing. Let me really quickly do that. Okay, that actually makes it so much better. So let's talk about actually why I made this. Well, the inner fourth grader in me was like, okay, what if the pieces were made of wood and leaves and stuff? Then we could just burn them all to clear the board. And then the other part of me was like, okay, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's spend multiple hours working on a project just to get that one idea across. And that's what our handy reset button does. It's actually in reality no way this fast. I've just cranked up the random tick speed, and I'm also basically like 80 times the tick speed or whatever of the game, so the lava's flowing super quickly. In reality, this takes actually forever. Oh, by the way, another thing about this machine is that it actually has no idea when it's finished burning, so you just kind of have to hit the reset button again, which doubles as turning off the lava. Alright, so let's actually talk about the interesting stuff. How the hell does this thing even work? But before we get into that, if you're liking the video so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel because these two large bars in my YouTube analytics say you should, and also really like big numbers. Anyways, the premise of the game is actually pretty simple. All we have to do is figure out what the player wants to do over here, basically which column they're picking, and then send an unpaid intern with a sapling in hand to that column, and drop them down, figure out where they actually place it. So in this slice, plant a tree, bone meal it, and then send the unpaid intern back to the beginning. Once that happens, the player is simply just going to drop all the way down to the bottom until they get to the bottom layer where they'll inevitably plant a sapling, and a tree will grow. But of course it's still even more complicated, because if we decide to send the player back to this same slot, it's just going to fall all the way back down again, and try to plant a tree in the exact same spot. So the way we stop that from happening is we use this wall, which changes its shape when there's a tree growing next to it, as you can see here. And that tells the slice above it to move this piston in, which then blocks the minecart, so that if this were to happen again, it's going to fall all the way down here and land on this rail instead, where it's going to plant the tree on this slot instead. And that essentially keeps happening until the slot fills up and then this diamond block moves over, which changes the signal from being sent to the slice to being sent to this big line that tells the player who's trying to play the game that they're an idiot because they tried to place a coin in an already full slice. The way we get the player to plant the right tree corresponding to the right player's turn is actually much simpler. Since the player is completely AFK and just holding down right click, we can't actually get them to switch slots to plant different trees. So what we do is we just have the first slot completely empty, and have the machine just dispense alternating saplings, and they'll just get planted as you go. And once you plant a sapling, if you have bone meal in your left hand, then you'll just be right-clicking it automatically, and that'll grow the tree automatically. That saves us from having to pipe bone meal to a dispenser at every spot, which would be completely terrible and would make this machine so much harder to build. It also means we'll run into some other stupid issues later in the process, but I'll get to that later. I'm not even going to go over how the reset button works. It literally is just hooked up to this line of lava at the top, which dumps lava all over all the trees. It's by far the simplest mechanism in this entire thing, and it's also the thing which this entire design is based off of. Now, at this point in the process, you might be wondering, hey, isn't it a massive waste of human resources to basically constantly need somebody to be sitting in this machine, constantly right-clicking in order to run this horrible thing? And my rebuttal to that is, yeah, that's a good point. Okay, onto the user interface. So first things first, there's this really cool tactile interface. Fun fact about this, since it's only keeping track of the turns using this digital system here, we can actually chuck anything into this, including dragon eggs, or even anvils, or even suspicious sand. The way this actually works is incredibly simple. We just have an observer that detects when you place the block, and it pulls the block out from under it and then crushes it with the target block. Since the sand tries to land inside of the space that a block is already occupying, the target block, after it gets moved in, it just breaks off and goes into this chest, which is probably now filled with all sorts of garbage. Now we get to send those signals that we're putting in here, and we get to send them all the way to the machine. Now this is a really fun part because I get to talk about how we're sending a signal strength without comparators, incredibly quickly all the way to the top of that machine. So the issue with signal strength is that we have to use comparators in order to preserve the value, and that ends up being super annoying over long distances because it takes a long while for any change to actually be registered. However, we can use this super neat thing, which actually transfers the signal exactly as fast as a standard redstone repeater line, as you can see in the bottom there. And the way this works is actually super cool, because the thing is if we set this to a signal strength of 1, it's actually only going to reach this first repeater here, and that's subsequently only going to reach as far as the first repeater in the next line of repeaters too, and that's also subsequently only going to reach the first repeater here too. And now if I were to change this to, for example, all the way to like 11, it's going to reach the 11th repeater, and since it's 11 blocks further along, it's going to reach the 11th repeater in the next one, and so on. And this works super well over incredibly long distances. I know there is instant comparator lines, and I've worked with them before, but they're hellish to do stuff with, and for a distance like this, it's really not worth it. Not to mention, moving the player around this giant board already takes so long that just saving a couple ticks for an instant comparator line is basically pointless. Now onto other miscellaneous garbage. Remember that sapling bone meal trick I showed you earlier? And how I said that it was going to cause problems in the future? Well, the thing is that if you're holding bone meal and say you use up half a stack of it and you need to get more bone meal, if you try to throw bone meal on the ground and try to pick it up while you have nothing in your main hand because you just planted a tree, it's going to overflow into your main hand. And then when you pick up subsequent saplings, it's going to go into your second hand, which is going to ruin things forever, and the machine is going to break. The way we actually remedy this problem is incredibly stupid. What we essentially do is when the player comes back after having planted the tree, we give them a singular wheat seed. And this goes into their main hand, so that when they drive by the bone meal dispenser, which is right here, and they pick up a bunch of bone meal, all the excess will only go into the second hand, and then as they fly by these composters, they dispose of the singular wheat seed, and everything's all good again. Now, a better solution would be to put the bone meal dispenser somewhere about like right here after they receive the sapling, so the main hand is already clogged up and they can't fill it with bone meal. But the reason why I didn't go with this solution is because I actually only just thought of it 10 minutes ago and I'm way too lazy to implement it now. And that for you is Tree Connect 4. In case there's something wrong with you and you'd like the world download, it should be available on my Discord server, I think, if I remember to put it there. Or, if you like the video, make sure to hit the button that says to YouTube, hey, I like this person's content, you should show me more of it. Or you should check out the other stuff in my channel, I make a bunch of other silly nonsense as well. We also got a Discord server, make sure to check it out, and that'll be it. Bye-bye!